before I will do at some point post spring a deep dive on the quarterback situations across the Big Ten, I think at first glance, Iowa has the opportunity for the first time in a long time to have one of the better quarterback situations in the conference.
You think so?
Yes.
You really believe they have one of the, so what does that mean? Does that mean you think they have one of the
Well,
better rooms in the conference?
that's a combination. It means that obviously, if the starters stay healthy, all that matters is your starting quarterback being as good as possible.
Okay,
But if that's
real
not
quick.
the case, then you want depth as well. So it's a combination of two. I think Mark Granowski, I've never watched him play. I've watched him throw like 5 passes. I've never watched him play. I've seen highlights after he signed. I did my due diligence of watching about 25 seconds of Mark Granowski.
And what'd you think of those 25 seconds?
I don't recall them, but I'm sure that they were fine.
Well, then it's hard for me to ask you the follow-up question because my question to start with is assuming Gronowski's the starter, because I remember when they brought in Cade McNamara, and both years that McNamara was here, you said, I don't think he's probably top half of the conference. You said maybe top half,
Yes.
I think. Well, I don't know where you said, because
And,
I thought for the
yeah.
situation, he was one of the better quarterbacks for his situation. It didn't pan out. He got hurt. But what they needed at that time under Brian, I thought he fit the mold perfectly, but it just didn't work out.
I agreed with you at the time, too. I said, this is a good addition. He's a smart quarterback. He can read the field and he knows what he's doing. He doesn't make mistakes.
But
He's
now
going to
he's
be
at Eastern
supported by
Tennessee.
run game and all those things. But I was pretty adamant about him not being a top level Big Ten, or even, yes, I was calling him a mid to lower tier Big Ten quarterback,
And now he's at East Tennessee State.
which backs up my point. But in Iowa's situation with that defense and special teams, that could have been enough had he
So
played better and stayed healthy.
let's approach this a little differently than we have other situations, other position previews. I want to go through our quarterbacks because you've seen, I know you saw very little of Gronowski, but you've seen extended play from Brennan Sullivan. You've seen extended play from Jackson Stratton because he started last year at Iowa. And even I'm guessing you watched some Hank Brown because he's played in games. Didn't he play against
He
Alabama?
played one game against
Not
New
Alabama.
Mexico State or
No, he did
somebody
not. He played
horrible.
a game against he played a bowl game, Mark. He played an entire bowl game.
Wait a minute. I believe if we pull up the stats, we will see that last year Hank Brown played against
I'm not talking about
Auburn's worst opponent, New
okay.
Mexico or
I'm
somebody.
talking about last year. I'm saying the year before that.
I didn't finish my statement. Then the previous year that he played against Maryland in the bowl game,
Correct.
and I think he even was either the starter who got benched or he was the mop up guy. He didn't play like 30 pass attempts.
Okay, no, you're
I think
right.
it's
But he threw for 132 yards, so that's more than a little action there. Is what I'm saying. You've at
yeah.
least gotten a glimpse of him, have an idea of what his stock would have been in the portal, and then yeah, he got benched. So let me ask you this: knowing what you know about the other quarterbacks in the conference, other presumed starters in the conference, let's start from top or from bottom to top. And
Mhm.
you tell me, assuming this Iowa player is the starting quarterback, where in the conference would they rank? I don't need a number, but where in the conference would they rank among starting quarterbacks? So let's start with Jackson Stratton. If Stratton was the starter, is he bottom of the conference?
Yes.
Okay. If Hank Brown is the Iowa starter, is he bottom of the conference?
Yes. But I will distinguish those two by saying, based on what I saw of Jackson Stratton, especially considering the circumstance at the Rose Bowl against UCLA versus Hank Brown, I'll take Jackson Stratton.
Really? Former walk on.
Just based on
Yeah.
that sample.
Okay.
I'm not watching practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're both Lester guys. You could argue now. They're both Lester guys.
I thought Stratton played pretty well
Yeah.
considering the circumstances.
Stratton, I believe what's ironic about that, didn't Stratton, his one start was Maryland, at Maryland. So you can literally compare Stratton versus Maryland to Hank Brown versus Maryland. But anyways, so those are the two guys. And then let's take it a step further. Brendan Sullivan. If Brendan Sullivan, that's where it gets interesting. If he is the starter, knowing what you've known about Brendan Sullivan, assuming normal growth, where does he rank in the conference?
Off the top of my head, 10 or 11.
Really, that high? I would have guessed you had said bottom fourth.
It's a pretty young and inexperienced collection of Big Ten quarterbacks this year.
Yeah. Well, that gives me. It's unfair for me to even ask you about Jimmy Sullivan because he's a freshman, although he did come during bowl prep. But man, can you imagine if he ends up being all these guys that have played, like not amazing resumes or amazing experience, but they've all played. That's a novelty, or that is a blessing to have all these guys that have set foot in the field. Like nobody's going to be deer in the headlights. You see what I'm saying?
That's one of the reasons I made that initial statement.
Yeah, nobody's going to be deer in the headlights. And if they are, it means they've had more injury issues than they did last year, and Jimmy Sullivan is the guy. So, and it's just huge that they got him for bowl prep and spring. You know, oftentimes they don't get a quarterback till fall, till summer. So, yeah, unfair to ask you about Jimmy Sullivan. If Granowski is the quarterback, where does he rank? Based on, I mean, I know you haven't watched a ton of it, but the rest of the conference, where would you say he ranks? This is a hard one. Is he top 10?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I was going to put him like 5 or 6.
Really? So that I think that's nothing against Mark Granowski, and I may have, without seeing him live in Iowa uniform, I have a hard time evaluating. I'm going to hold off on judgments because I learned the hard way with Cade McNamara, and we looked at Cade McNamara on the field against high-level competition. We were watching Mark Granowski, albeit with lesser receivers, against FCS competition. I got to see him, and he's coming off this injury. But I would have guessed you'd have said maybe top 10. That says more, I think, about how you view the rest of the conference's quarterbacks.
Correct.
Because he's more of a, I think we can all agree on this. He is a better version of Cade McNamara. He's a winner. He's old. He's had injury issues, but not as staunch and recent, although this one is a minor setback. He's a better athlete with a better arm. Like he's just, to me, every category, he's a notch above what Cade McNamara was or what we perceived him to be. And I don't know that if Tim Lester had been here 2 years ago, first of all, we wouldn't have been in the mess that we were in. But if he had been here 2 years ago, I don't know that they would have went after Cade. My guess is they would have gone after other people and gotten somebody better.
You are going through the same check marks and going through the same analysis just with a different player. I'm thinking about what Max Brosmer did at Minnesota last year, and with the understanding that he's less talented in terms of arm talent and velocity and less mobile, not significantly, but I understand that Granowski's not Michael Vick, but that he's much more of a threat on the ground, and Brosmer is not at all. And he was a top 5 to 7 quarterback in the Big Ten last year.
Only difference, to be devil's advocate on that, is Brosmer broke records at New Hampshire through the air. Different level, but I'm just saying Granowski's numbers at South Dakota State were usually pretty pedestrian. Part of the reason is because they didn't need to throw the ball. Other part of the reason is he ran the ball real effectively. They ran. I mean, obviously, the best teams in college football typically are balanced on offense, control the ground game, control the game with the ground game, and that's kind of what they've been. They've been, national contenders, national champions since he got there. So that would be the only difference I would point to. He's not like some unbelievable stats guy. And so that, neither was Cade, right? Cade came as a winner, but the difference is who is evaluating him. And I do think he's a much better athlete. The injury thing, and I know fans, a lot of they're everybody's polarized by things now, but there's one segment of the fan base that's concerned about the injury. And there's another part of the fan base that says it's no big deal. I think we can, again, try to be balanced and say it's somewhere in between. We don't know because we haven't seen him. We haven't seen him with these receivers, with this staff, with this offense. And we have not seen him recover from this injury. Yes, he had a serious knee injury early in his career. Yes, it was been a long period of time in between, but nothing's guaranteed with procedures and rehab. So that should make fans nervous. Now, I don't want to say, crawl up in the fetal position in the corner of your man cave all off season and worry about it and rock yourself to sleep. But I do think that it's something that's a question mark. It's fair to say it's a question mark, and it should give all the quarterbacks that are on the roster, including freshman Jelly Roll, Jimmy Sullivan, all the way up to Brendan Sullivan, who played most of last year, reason to believe that they can overtake his spot. Now, I don't think they will. I still think Granowski will probably be the starter in the fall, but that's the approach those guys got to take. And if they're good enough, then maybe they will. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of time where, again, he doesn't have any background with Iowa, has not been able to do anything through winter and now into spring. And he's not going to really be able to work out with full team workouts until August, just weeks before the season. That's the concern. And so those other guys have, even Jimmy Sullivan has somewhat of an advantage to some extent with Iowa. But then Mark Granowski brings tons of experience at a high level. And he's also got experience in Kinnick. Remember, he came and played in that game in 2021 and, didn't play well against that Iowa defense. But he is I'll say this from off the field perspective. And I have had conversations with people that know Mark. He is a different person than Cade. Like, he's totally a different person than Cade. Nothing against Cade McNamara. He was esteemed as a leader when he got to Iowa. And I thought it was a little strange, but at the same time, you want to embrace that. You want to believe that the leadership is at an all-time high. And I'm not saying it wasn't. I'm also not saying it was fool's gold or phony. But then you hear some different things later in his career. Mark Granowski is a different type of leader, but he's a strong leader. I think he's a charismatic guy. He's not a cocky guy, based on what I've been told. And I think his roots may probably be just the fact that he comes from South Dakota State, although he's a winner there. He understands he's coming up a level. Cade McNamara, in a sense, was a guy who had it all at Michigan, took him to a Big Ten championship, college football playoff, and he's kind of lowering his standards to resurrect Iowa. It's just different circumstances. So I think that plays to Iowa's advantage. And the best case scenario is that he's the starter, because I think he's got the best upside of all of them. I still think Brendan Sullivan could be a Big Ten level starter. The biggest concern is what we saw in the second half against Mizzou, is it seemed like the big moment got to him. And obviously with Mark Granowski's pedigree, that might be the one thing that he does not lack. He does not lack confidence in big moments. So that's what he brings. That's the one big thing besides just winning. That's the one big thing that he brings to the table that none of those other quarterbacks can say. He's been in huge moments and performed at a high level. And that's what Iowa needs. If they're going to, with this roster, I think they have a chance of being pretty good. The schedule's difficult. If they're going to in any way compete for a 12-team playoff, he's got to be able to perform in big moments, because history tells you that the defense will keep them in games and give them opportunities to win some of those games. But the difference oftentimes in the sport is quarterback play.